conversation today is focused on data collection and specifically the demographic data that we ask IDA clients to provide. That is the intake questions about racial and ethnic identities, language, ability, and gender. We'll start by grounding ourselves in our purpose and asking for this information, where these questions came from, and some principles and values we want to lift up in the way that we ask for and use this data. And then we'll take some time, both individually and in small groups, for peer learning to share promising practices or strategies you use, maybe identify some strategies that we need to develop. We have 10 minutes built in for a break, and then we'll work in the same small groups again, making meaning from the recent data that has been collected so that you can explore how this data might be used and possibly make some connections to next steps in your work. We will have an exit survey, which will ask for how NP can further support you in these next steps. And our aim is to wrap up by 11:30. There is a lot of information that we collect and use in this program. And today we are just focusing on this one piece labeled client info, which focuses on demographics. If you have questions about other forms and other data collection, the first place to start is with your fiduciary organization, your FO. So whether that's CASA of Oregon, Dev Northwest, Habitat. If that doesn't address your question, please feel free to reach out to me though directly. We recognize it's a whole process, so figuring out at what point clients need which information. Okay, switching gears to focus on our why. I'm going to start with the IDA initiative mission statement, and I'm going to read the first part aloud. The Oregon IDA initiative brings state resources to support financial stability and wealth building among Oregonians with lower incomes, working to ensure an equitable and statewide impact in communities historically and systemically excluded from economic opportunities. I want to note that the work of asking savers to provide demographic data, our topic here today, feeds directly into our ability to understand the degree to which we are meeting this part of our mission. Touching on the wealth gap briefly, because of barriers that our institutions have put in place, we see in our society racial and other disparities in who has access to financial stability, financial wealth building, financial well-being, and wealth. And as an asset building program, we need to be attentive to who we are reaching and who we are not in terms of program participation and program success, with a focus on groups that face barriers to wealth building and economic stability, including Black, Indigenous, Latinx, Asian, and Pacific Islander communities, people experiencing disability, and more. And we do this so that we can make data-informed decisions about where program modifications are needed, build our capacity to understand and respond to the language or accessibility needs of participants, and understand the degree to which our activities and impacts are promoting equity. While recognizing the diversity within groups at a certain level, asking these questions can also make visible people's experiences, which are fundamental to program administration, policy, and advocacy. The way we use data to look at who we are enrolling and who is successful in getting matched funds by race, for example, has been an important tool for us. It has been instrumental in garnering support from Oregon Housing and Community Services, OHCS, whose program this is, the legislature, the governor. So, for example, we share this data in our biennial evaluation report, and that's shared with OHCS, the Housing Stability Council, legislators, and funders. It helps us identify where resources are needed. Looking at this data regionally has allowed us to take a more detailed look at the racial groups in our communities and understand the extent to which our programs are set up to reach and serve all groups equitably. So this screenshot is an example from a document we released with the 2022 requests for proposals for funding the IDA fiduciary organizations. where we made some funding available to address the gaps that we saw based on the data. And in a third example, we established metrics released annually to each FO, comparing the racial demographics of each FO's savers to the population living on low incomes. And we want to make sure that IDAs are reaching communities at least in proportion to their population. And as we have worked with this data over time, the initiative has shifted who we reach. The racial diversity of our program has increased over time. And as we address racial inequities, we will build tools, strategies, and resources that will make us better equipped to make the transformations needed to impact other marginalized groups, making our programs more inclusive and work for all. But we cannot set equity goals for ourselves without this demographic information. And if savers don't provide us with demographic information, we will be making poorly informed decisions. So here in Oregon, a group of organizations came together, led by the Oregon Health Equity Alliance and APANO, and developed a set of demographic questions that responded to the interests of communities of color. It's called the Real D, and it was adopted by Oregon Health Authority and the Department of Human Services, and requirements for those agencies to use it were put into law. As they researched best practices and developed the Real D, they prioritized approaching people for this information in a way that sees and values participants and asks for a certain level of detail and consistency, allowing people to self-identify and to select multiple responses and categories. They call on us to have an abundance mindset, that there can be complexity and we can deal with it. We don't need to always lump huge categories of people together, which contributes to erasure. And their approach works to normalize discussions, for example, around disabilities, and give people an opportunity to be upfront about the challenges they face, which might make things go smoother as they go through the program. So we looked at the Real D, and we brought these questions to a series of focus groups with IDA savers. And then based on that feedback, we did make a few adjustments before we rolled out these questions in April 2022. We have some template forms that hopefully your forms are drawing from. And you'll see at the top of our forms, we have an introductory explanation for why we're asking for this information and some other key points that clients should know. And I'm just going to read it aloud. We ask all clients the following questions about language, race, disability, gender, and other lived experiences. IDA providers use this information to improve services in our communities and understand who is able to access IDAs. Your answers do not reflect your eligibility and are confidential. Your individual answers are not shared with local, state, or federal government. So these can be important points to come back to when discussing this with clients in a positive, affirming way. I want to briefly highlight some of the best practices that have been identified by IDA participants and also by some of you and your peers who have shared your processes with us. And so I just want to acknowledge that these conversations with clients can be easier when you have been able to build a sense of partnership before asking for this information. And also the process of talking about this can help further build relationship depending on how it's handled. It's important to recognize that our own training and experience with institutional oppression can impact that conversation. So first, I want to, we encourage people to be transparent. Explain that we ask this information of everybody to improve services, again, in our communities and understand who is able to access and benefit from IDAs. You can note that at first glance, it can seem like a lot. You might point out that there's a lot of options. It's not quite as many questions. If it comes back blank, we've heard from you that it's important to not jump to conclusions that the participant didn't want to fill it out, but just bring back a focus on it. Look it through together with the client. Next, we encourage you to be ready to use a variety of modalities to meet the participant where they are. We encourage you to make available an option to complete these forms digitally, which may include outcome tracker self-service forms, and that can streamline the process. I want to uplift that we recognize the value of allowing a client to self-identify. There are lots of cultural components that might impact someone's perception of their race and ethnicity, for example, which may change over time. I want to reiterate the client needs to provide their responses to these questions, preferably after they've been approved for their IDA, but it does need to be part of the intake process. And while holding flexibility and understanding, these questions must be completed. We need this information. So the client needs to return something to you. It is true that the client determines how to fill it out, and we respect that. They can fill out, don't want to answer to the question. But one purpose of today is to provide some tools. So hopefully that's not a default response from everyone. And then it's important to clearly label that this is not a part of the eligibility determination. Our proposed solution is to ask these demographic questions after eligibility has been determined. And that might split the intake process into two parts, which we know some providers have had success with. And in this current moment, I think it might be important to make clear or to respond when you're asked, would it make a difference if I was Mexican? To say we do not use race, religion, sex, national origin, any protected class as a selection or decision criterion in selecting which individuals will have the opportunity to enroll in an IDA. In light of last summer's affirmative action ruling, I just want to highlight the middle course that we are seeking to follow, which is to adhere to the prevailing legal constraint without abandoning any forthright attempt to address racial inequity. So we're operating from our current understanding that we can be race conscious in our policy making and program decision making, but we cannot use race as a decision or selection criterion at the individual level. So this is not about prioritizing individuals for services. It's about designing our programs and networks with communities in mind. And over the last few years, we have explored what strategies we have available to us under civil rights law. And during the break, I will share a resource that came out of those discussions. Now once more, Allie, if you could, I would like to put the links in the chat to our intake template so that people can scan the specific questions that we're talking about today that are the IDA questions. I know you're all familiar with your paperwork, but also some of you have additional demographic questions on your agency membership applications or things that are collected for different purposes, which it's easy to lose track of. We have had some questions about the duplication, and that is definitely something worth thinking about. And I guess even if I can't help address that immediately, I would appreciate hearing from you the challenge that you're facing with duplication. And I think that's the first step in terms of any future modifications we might make or problem solving around how we can reduce some of the burden. Okay, and at this point, we're going to take 10 minutes to reflect on your experience talking with clients about these questions. This is just for you. You can journal, you can type it out. Some of the reflections that come out of this, you might choose to bring into the discussion this morning, but there will be no share out of this. But I'd like you to think about situations when you hand the intake paperwork to a saver that includes these demographic questions, where you're working through the paperwork together. What feelings have you identified within yourself when asking clients about race, ethnicity, language, disability, and gender? And if you feel some discomfort, what do you think is the source of that discomfort? And how do you respond when discomfort shows up? And there's no right or wrong to this. This is just for your personal learning and a chance to bring some intentionality to our discussions. So we'll be back in, we'll pick it back up again in 10 minutes. Okay, welcome back. So now we have some housekeeping to arrange ourselves into small groups for our first discussion here. So you are going to choose your breakout group based on which region you wish to learn. And you can choose based on which region you wish to learn more about, a region where you're actively working, or a region that maybe you're looking in expanding into. And the intent is to choose the same group for both the upcoming discussion and for our session after the break. So the regional data we'll be looking at after the break, but we want people to get a chance to start working together in this first breakout group. And I realize I need to okay. Okay, so the first task when you get into your breakout group is actually to choose a reporter and a recorder. The reporter will report back to a large group, highlighting some key pieces from your discussion. You won't be able to highlight everything, but choose one promising practice and one or two challenges that your group discuss. I'm encouraging NP staff to not play that reporter role or the recorder role. I would really like us to bring forward your experiences and hear from you directly as people who are more directly impacted in this work, okay? So you'll have an NP person in your group, but they'll help you choose roles and get the conversation started. And in this first session, you have two questions that we're going to discuss. First, in working with clients, how do you explain why we ask for information on race, language, disability, and gender? So sharing your promising practices. And then second, if a client is unsure how to respond or expresses hesitancy or discomfort, what have you found to be the most useful for both encouraging completion of these questions and also respecting a client's choice to opt out? Okay, and we will have 20 minutes in the breakout groups, and then we'll come back at 9:50 or so. Welcome back, everyone. I'd like to take a few minutes now and give each breakout group a chance to share some highlights from their conversation. So I encourage you to do that by picking one challenge, one or two challenges, and one promising practice to share with the group. And just note that everyone will have access to the slides. So to the notes that if you've put notes in the slides, then everyone will be able to go through those as well. I'd like to call on the reporter from the group that I was in, Gordon Scott. If you would start us off, that would be great.
Okay. Oh, I don't think I caught what you were saying just a couple of seconds ago.
Oh, sorry about that. Yeah, I'm just encouraging each group to share one challenge and one promising practice to share with the group.
Okay. Can I start off with that?
Yeah.
Okay, sweet. Well, just in general, I felt like our group listened. As I was talking, I was kind of noticing everybody listening, and also when other people are talking, we're just kind of, interested in what everybody had to say. So I think that's a good practice, and if we're doing that with our clients, that's really awesome. And a good practice, I feel like, is we let our clients talk, and we listen. And so that is a very good practice, especially if we do that all day, every day. Um, so our group, a few of our folks were in the rural areas, out in Central Oregon. One was Portland Metro, and some of us served a diverse group, and some of us kind of served broadly. So that's the people that gave input. I think the big thing I noticed from everybody is that as we're explaining some questions about demographics, we didn't get a lot of declining from what we had said. We sounded like we all explained the outlines of that stuff pretty well, and so a few of us mentioned that we give space to let our clients ask questions. I gave the example of I like to train or at least teach some of our clients of why we're asking. And it sounded like everybody was nodding their head that they do that as well. So that's great. One person said that as tech is evolving, this is what I kind of heard, but there's less questions. They just kind of go ahead and just click the yeses and nos and put in their input. And I get worried for that because I really like teaching. With me, I live far away. And so I would serve a very unique population with Native Americans. And I use this space to teach them of why we're asking, why we're asking all these details. It's for money, and that money is coming back to our clients here on the reservation. So I kind of caught that from the other folks too, that they're pretty good at explanation. So hopefully the technology doesn't bump us all out of the conversation is when I heard that. Setting up ahead of time to explain all this stuff helps people, especially like I heard the opt-out question. And not a lot of people opt out. They may ask, but more or less they'll go on and answer all the questions. And a good thing I heard was the assumptions, that we all kind of assume that everything's okay. Just go ahead and ask them. It's part of the process. But I felt like our group explaining everything kind of eases tension, eases questions, and we don't get a lot of pushback in our work. Because of what we're explaining pretty well. So that was, I think, a roundabout summary of what we talked about. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Gordon. Let's see, how about Allie's group? Is there a reporter from Allie's group who would be willing to speak next?
I'm perhaps am the report. I didn't really realize it until the end of the discussion, so I definitely would invite more people who shared in the group to say their experiences that they shared. But yeah, we talked about working toward equal representation for all and explaining information on race, disability, and gender. And as far as the best practice, we heavily emphasize telling people about equal representation for all. But yeah, if anyone from our group wants to share their experiences about that, that would be great. I didn't write it down because I didn't really realize I was the one going to be doing it. So.
Thank you, Abby. Is there anyone else from Allie's group that would like to share a promising practice that you've found or a challenge that you're facing?
I can add something. So a lot of us said that we don't really get a lot of pushback from clients filling out the form, but one thing that that was mentioned and that a possible like discomfort was talking about asking certain questions that we have experiencing. I use the example of a disability because I know a lot of people don't want to be looked as different or used as a label. And obviously, as someone who's not disabled, there's things that I will never understand, struggles that I will never understand, but try my hardest to understand. And then one of those best practices for those that was mentioned was just kind of just reiterating the reasons we're asking to get a better sense of our population, how we can assist every population in our IDA program.
Thank you, Oscar, and thank you for lifting up that discomfort of asking about things that maybe we're not sure how to respond to. Does anyone want, let's take a minute. Does anyone want to speak to that challenge? Is that something you're experiencing? How are you facing that? And I'll just state, like, from my perspective, I think the first step is recognizing that discomfort and that challenge that we're facing, right? So just want to appreciate raising that issue. Let's see, how about Randy Lucas's group? Is there a reporter from Randy Lucas's group?
Yeah, hi, Amy. It's me, Nada.
Hi, Nada.
Yeah, hi. We had the team, we discussed the overall idea. Most of them, which I really like, they all have a system. They've been doing it for a long time. So in my case, the client sits next to me and we work on those together. But the majority, and I appreciate them sharing this with us, they all have a system. They email it to them, and majority don't have any issues. Like like in my case, the organization I'm with right now, we serve minority women-owned in the construction field. The other participants, they don't have that. So they just send it to them. It's part of their process. So, and they never had, at least from what I remember or I'm reading, they don't have any hiccups or questioning with any issues that they had to face or to share with their clients. And something looks like they've been doing for many years. We are new to this, so this is new for us.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, thank you, Nada.
Can I add to that, Amy?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so there was, I think there was a little different format from organization to organization. Portland Housing Center does a model where they do the demographics after someone's been accepted into the program, so that it's completely separate from the application process, where some of them do it while they're doing the application. And I also, one of the things I noticed in the discussion was Nada's program focuses mainly on culturally specific group, whereas the other ones were more open to the public. And so I was kind of wondering if that may play a role in those discussions and the comfort level of people filling out those demographic surveys.
Yeah, and I feel like as providers, we generally know or what works best for our communities, and we just need to be always attuned to that, and be willing to shift as the needs of our communities shift, and also maybe be willing to shift, as individual needs arise as well, right? But yeah, how about Randy Corradine's group? Was there a reporter from that group?
Yes. Hi, good morning.
Good morning.
Yeah, so it was really interesting in our group that most, of the group is composed for new IDA coordinators or people who works with the IDA program. We all have been within the program maybe or within a year. So something that we would like to share, there was a lot of discussion on the first one, but I feel we covered both questions. So when it comes to immigrant or refugee community, many folks have limited English. So we like on the organizations try to serve as much and as best as possible. And sometimes clients don't understand how to, how to fill forms, what they are really asking on the form. And what we do is we ask co-workers who speak the same language to assist, and most of the time clients appreciate having this help in the same language. They get the explanation and they get the assistance to fill out the full application, and then at the end clients are happy to share the information when they know what it is for, and that it's helpful for the organization to help them better.
Thank you so much for that, Norma. And I think we had one last group. There was a group with Derek. Is there a reporter from that group that would like to share a challenge or a promising practice that came up in your discussion?
So in our group, Sammy came in last, and we asked her the first question of like, how do we explain why we ask for this information regarding, race, language, disability, and all that. She had a good response in that regarding the disability one, it's like where she works, they have stairs. So if like if they have a disability and they can't like make it upstairs, it's like, okay, that's good for us to know so we can have our meetings, on like the ground floor, that kind of thing. Yeah, that's pretty much it. We didn't really have a lot of like, a lot of the responses was not a lot of our clients had asked like questions about why we're gathering this, or if they do, we just give, the explanation helps with, us gathering data for demographics and whatnot, how we can better serve the low-income communities and whatnot. Yeah, that's it.
Thank you, Bella. The theme I heard, I think, was like transparency. If they just explain why, including explanations about legislative advocacy, that most folks opt in.
Thank you all. So we are going to do one more piece. Derek is going to present to us just for a couple minutes, and then we'll go into our break. We just wanted to offer, as one of the important pieces of all this is that confidentiality, that data security piece. So we just want to offer a quick refresher for everyone on some of the practices that we ask for in the initiative.
Hi, everybody. My name is Derek. I am part of the IDA team, and I work mostly with you all in terms of the database outcome tracker. So we wanted to do, while we have your attention, a reminder or maybe introduction to data security and what our expectations are. Right, you all know this. We collect a lot of data. I've listed some on here: assets and liabilities, names and addresses, social security numbers for some of you, bank account numbers, and more. So data security is something that we really take seriously, and we have standard operating procedures around them. Let's see, switch. Okay, so there's kind of two components. There's file management, and then there's cyber security practices. I'll do file management first. We all collect a lot of files, some physical, some electronic. What we are saying is that you must have kind of a two-lock system in place. So that could be a physical like two-lock thing where you have paper files in a locked file cabinet in a room or a building that is locked. Electronically, if you have it on a server that is shared with all your org, right? But not everybody is in the IDA program, like doing the IDA program, then electronic files should be in a password protected folder that IDA staff have access to on and then on a secure server. I think that's standard practice for companies and organizations. And then the other one is, you can store files in Outcome Tracker. Outcome Tracker is secure as long as you have, a secure password and you're accessing that computer with through internet with a combination firewall and virus protection. So that's what we are saying. Most of you all have IT. You work with IT folks, so they should have set this up. And then our program fiscal reviews does kind of go through this with you all to make sure this is happening. Another thing is, so these are the practices we expect from you all, which is that in Outcome Tracker, two-factor authentication is enabled. What that means is if you log into a computer that Outcome Tracker is not familiar with, it will send an email or a text asking, sending you a code, which you then input into your login, which then allows you to log into Outcome Tracker. Another thing is OT should never be accessed via public Wi-Fi. So that means going to a coffee shop and then using their network. That's a big no-no because those can be really easily hacked. No shared OT accounts. So if you are at an org and you're sharing one account with like multiple people, that's a big no-no. Talk to your org or talk to us about getting an individual login. When working from home, which a lot of us are doing, make sure your Wi-Fi is password protected. It's not an open network where other folks can just get on it and use it. Strong password. What is a strong password? Right now we're saying 14 characters using numbers, symbols, uppercase, lowercase, things like that. Any questions, comments, advice?
I have one, Derek.
Yeah, go for it.
So like a front lock door and then like a file office lock door, and are those considered too?
Yes,
Okay.
great question. Yes. Back to you, Amy.
Let's take a break and come back at 10:25.
You want people to stay logged in, right? Just close their screen.
If you can. Thank you, Derek, for the music. We're going to come back together now. And my clock is still saying 10:24, so maybe I'll give it another few seconds here because I think I don't want to get going too early here. Okay. We are now going to review the recent data in our small groups and talk about what it means. And I encourage people to bring their own knowledge and experiences to the discussion. It's an important piece of this. You as stakeholders have insight into why the data might look the way it does. And so we would like to surface that. I want to mention that OHCS, whose program this is focusing more and more on data-informed decisions and understanding how we are reaching all communities across Oregon. And this is an agency-wide imperative. And so we want to give you an opportunity to build those muscles of making meaning from data. So the first step is Allie is going to provide us an overview with some statewide data and help us look at some of these charts and understand how to read them. And then we will join our small groups again and have some time to discuss it further. So let's see, I will share my screen and Allie will start us off.
Hi everyone, thanks for the introduction, Amy. I'm Allie. I'm the data and evaluation analyst at Neighborhood Partnership, and I use she, her pronouns. So today, like Amy said, I'm going to delve into some key demographic data regarding IDA clients at the initiative-wide level. And then later on during the breakout sessions, you'll have the opportunity to explore similar data at a regional level. And before we dive in, I just want to provide a bit of context on the data that I'm sharing today. It's from IDA participants who opened accounts between July 1st, 2022 and the end of 2023. And we'll also be looking at data from the American Community Survey on Oregon population estimates. So this first figure looks at the statewide prevalence of limited English speakers and their languages spoken at home. So we see starting on the left that around 5% of low-income individuals in Oregon identify as having a limited English proficiency, and we find a similar level among IDA participants. And then going along on the other side of the figure, we see the breakdown of commonly spoken languages among both the low-income state population with limited English proficiency and IDA savers with limited English proficiency. So Spanish is the most common, overwhelmingly. Over 60% of low-income Oregonians with limited English proficiency speak Spanish at home, and nearly 70% of IDA participants with limited English proficiency speak Spanish. And we can see across Oregon, IDA participants with limited English proficiency who speak Spanish, Arabic, and Russian are served at rates that are at least proportional to the population. Vietnamese and Somali speakers with limited English proficiency are served at lower rates. And IDA participants with limited English proficiency also speak a number of other languages. For example, some participants reported that their home languages were Burmese or Rohingya. Next slide, please. So this figure takes a comparative look at the degree to which IDA participants with limited English proficiency who speak Spanish at home are served in proportion to that population. So we saw in the last figure that overall IDA participants with limited English proficiency who spoke Spanish at home were served at rates greater than the population, so that dot was higher. And now we can look at how that information varies regionally. So the purplish color kind of indicates that the proportion of IDA participants with limited English proficiency who speak Spanish at home is equivalent to the proportion of the low-income population with limited English proficiency who speak Spanish at home in that region. And the red suggests that the rate of IDA participants is greater than that population level, and the blue indicates that it's lower. So we have a pretty colorful map, that there's a lot of regional variation. One way to read this, for example, is looking at the Central District. It's directly comparing data from the population and the data from our program. And we see that among people who are low income and with a low proficiency in English, the proportion of those who speak Spanish is greater among IDA participants. So one way to interpret that is that potentially the program is more likely to reach non-proficient English speakers who speak Spanish at home than other languages. Next figure, please, or next slide. So moving gears a bit, we're now looking at a figure which shows the functional limitations experienced in Oregon's low-income population and among IDA participants across Oregon. So the way to read this, for example, would be around 4% of low-income Oregonians experience vision difficulty, and around 2% of IDA participants experience vision difficulty. Across Oregon, IDAs are reaching people with functional limitations at rates that are lower than proportional to the population. So looking at this figure, maybe something to keep in mind when discussing in the small breakout groups is how can the process of accessing an IDA be made more accessible to those with functional limitations? Next slide, please. So this map looks at the degree to which IDA participants with at least one functional limitation are served in proportion to the population in that region. So closer to red indicates that the rate of IDA participants served is greater than the regional population rate, and the purple and blue indicate the reverse. Next slide, please. So the final piece of demographic client data that we'll be showing today is the race and ethnicity categories among IDA participants. So the columns label the race/ethnicity, the percentage of IDA participants who identify with that race or ethnicity, and the number of people. So we can read this as around 11% of IDA participants who opened an account during this window were African American, which amounts to 188 people. As a clarification, the unknown category includes don't know, decline, and missing responses. The client demographic survey offers a pretty detailed race/ethnicity breakdown, and often we see this information collated up like in the equity metrics. But based on research from organizations such as the Oregon Health Equity Alliance, the more specific categories that are available as options allow individuals to feel more aligned with their option rather than just selecting other. This is also additional information for us. The larger umbrella categories aren't able to provide information on the historical and sociocultural disparities that differ within a racial category. So now we'll break into the same small groups and look at this information by region, specifically discussing the questions: how does this more detailed data change how you understand who we're reaching? And given this information, what might be possible action steps for your program that would benefit communities?
Thank you, Allie. And yeah, I just want to, your NP person can help you find the slides for your region. And then I just also wanted to mention, you know, action step can be small, and it's okay to have additional questions or additional things to look into. So with that, please go ahead and choose your, sorry everyone, we're gonna go back to our breakout groups for 10 more minutes. I heard that some people, we could start if the group that was discussing the Mid-Valley data, if they had a reporter who'd be willing to start us off. Yeah, just share some highlights from your discussion.
Yeah, so just in answering the first question, like why is the detailed data change how you understand who we are reaching? It reiterates why we are trying to reach out to the community and be more visible ourselves and how to be more attentive when we are assisting, like the correct way according to a client's own identified culture, because every culture has different ways on the way they perceive and do things. And then for the second bulletin, given this information, what might be possible action steps for your program? And then we spoke about a few things, but the big things that kind of stood just bare bones across was a admin person available to assist with the different types of applications as needed. I think that was with Yamhill County with Oscar. He brought that up. They actually have someone there that's able to help with the different application needs, which is awesome. I wish everyone was able to do that, but that's really good for them. And we brought up in ours translation services. The big thing is making sure the client-facing materials maintain the same meaning and need once they are translated and sent out for clients. That way, what we're getting back is matching obviously what we're asking for, because sometimes in translation it can get lost. And then we just kind of spoke about in general, like learning about this, being more open to why we do need to understand this, because it does have a lot of proof in historical data as to like who we are servicing more and more often. So just making sure we are looking at this data and understanding it's not breaking people down, it's not making them a certain form, and it's not putting them in a certain bucket or anything like that. It is literally like this is the data. Obviously, we need to be more able to reach others in the community. So that's why we talked about how we need to look at the data.
Thank you so much, Miranda. Randy Corradine's group, did they have a reporter who would be willing to speak up?
Hi, sorry, my internet's glitching a little bit. Something that we said is that looking at this data lets us understand the communities we're working with and expand our efforts and outreach to communities that are not as represented. And also that looking at the data, looks like the Spanish speaking community has been reached or overrepresented. And maybe we can try to direct outreach to other communities that speak other languages like Vietnamese and other languages.
Thank you, Norma. Did Randy Lucas's group have a reporter?
That would be me. And are we focusing on the second question?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. So I think with the information that we looked at, I think just looking at more bilingual staff and services to the areas that they reach, more collaboration among organizations in the communities, especially in rural areas where resources are more limited, more outreach and marketing and participation in community events as a whole, as well as prioritizing referrals from both culturally specific and culturally responsive organizations. And then one thing that was also mentioned was focusing on what the organization does best and the programs offered. So the example given was basically pulling back on the number of different IDAs served and really focusing on what that organization specializes in will help build that expertise and give people the best services that they can get out of that organization and the experience that they have.
Yeah, I appreciate that call out for the quality of the services and as well.
Yeah.
Did Derek's group have a reporter?
No, I messed up. And well, I'm gonna report out. So we kind of went rogue in a good way. There was more questions, I think, than answers, and some reporting about how they respond to the data, which was really interesting. Anyway, if you look at the COAST data that we have, right, there's a lot of Spanish speaking folks, and there was this comment about how it seems like a lot of the Spanish speaking folks who open complete, but other, like there's this other group in the data, they complete less. They open, but they don't complete less. And so we were trying to, one, figure out which populations those are, and then, but we weren't, there wasn't really an answer of why those groups weren't completing. And then my group kind of tried to discuss it because there was Habitat folks and NeighborWorks, UMQA folks. So kind of like, yeah, and we didn't really reach a conclusion. And then the other part that I thought was interesting was around the functional limitations data and how that's really helped to make the program more responsive, like specifically to those needs, you know, whether somebody has limited vision, so providing forms that are like blown up, you know, in terms of the text, things like that, providing like a paper, like the presentation in a paper form so somebody can look at it. Feel free to add my group if you want to, yeah, that part like kind of was super exciting to hear for me that our partners are so awesome and responsive.
Thank you. And I think the last group would be my group. I'll just issue a call one more time, see if we have a reporter. Our discussion also went in lots of different directions. So we didn't exactly come to a concrete, we didn't tie it up neatly in the end. We also had questions. But I think we also had discussions about how this information can better prepare us to understand our communities and understand what services we might need to be providing. And we also had useful questions about NP being more clear about what is expected or what are our thoughts when we look at this data. And we will look on that. And I just want to say I value the exchange of hearing from you in terms of what you see as your next steps to build programs that are more equitable and more accessible, something we're always reaching for as well. So in a bit, I will put a link to an exit ticket in the chat that I would love to have everyone complete and share with us if you identified one next step for your program or a possible next step, or it could be another question that you want to look into. It could be some training you want to pursue. It could be a conversation you want to reach out to someone to have. We would love to hear those next steps that you're identifying, including how you would like NP to support you with that. So that link will be forthcoming in the chat. Before we do that, and then I guess I also just want to reiterate again, appreciations for the good discomfort that comes from recognizing lots of different needs and trying to identify how we can meet all of those needs with the resources we have too. So I just want to encourage us to continue to lean into that question. That's where our hard work is. So I am not sure the status of everyone's access to Outcome Tracker on the call, but I just want to mention some resources that are in Outcome Tracker. Maybe this is something you need to reach out to your FO for more information or access on, but we do have information where you can look and find information on the clients that you are serving, your organization specifically, and that is in Outcome Tracker. And then lastly, another piece of this is continuing our own learning as well. And so Randy and Derek are going to mention a couple of opportunities that NP has coming up.
Yes, hello everybody. So just wanted to extend some opportunities for continued learning, specifically as it relates to our race and equity training and work. So if you just completed the most recent core equity training that rounded out last week, we will be sending an invite to that group in the next few weeks for a discussion group to discuss a specific topic that came up from that training. It will be targeted specifically to the most recent attendees, but all participants from the last training will be welcome to join us for that discussion group. For everybody, something that's coming up in the spring is we'll be having a community of practice, which is just a virtual learning space based on our summer special program that we offered last year in partnership with Tahoma Institute, which is a Indigenous women's race and equity practitioner group that centers Indigenous communities and populations within their work. They did a 4-part series with us, so we'll be doing that as a virtual community of practice. It'll be on Thursdays, 10 to 11:30. It may be noon. Is actually going to be 2 hours, so 10 to noon. And these are the dates, the Thursdays that it will launch. And the registration for that will go live at the latest on Monday of next week. And then just keep your eyes open if you haven't had a chance to complete the NP-IDA core equity training. We're looking to do another virtual training series, most likely this summer. The date and times for that are to be determined, but that will be coming later this year as well. So thank you. And if you have any questions, you can just email me directly.
Hi, and I'm here to advertise Reconference 2024. For folks that are new, this is our 2-day conference in Salem, Oregon that we have. We invite policy advocates, coalition conveners, organizers, and program administrators, and you all to come and do some trainings, attend some workshops. This year something new that we're doing is opening up session proposals. So at some point this month, we're going to be putting that on the website, which is reconf.org. And you can go there, sign up to our mailing list, and then, visit the website at some point and look at the session proposal form. So we're asking partners, you all, to propose sessions at Reconference. So save the date, October 15th and 16th in Salem.
Thank you, Randy and Derek. And with that, we would like you to complete the exit survey and share your ideas and your needs with us. And just want to appreciate everyone's contributions to the conversation today. And it's always great to hear about all of the work that you are doing within your programs. And great to hear your questions as well. And just want to appreciate you. Thank you.